Okay, we are now live with Dave Vester and Sal DeBabney, and we are presenting on behalf of Group 3 for our CIT370 System Security class. We are presenting on the IP Fire open source Linux firewall distribution. And we've got a quick PowerPoint slide that we'll go through, and then we'll move right into a demonstration of the installation and initial configuration. So basic key points of the feature list with the IP firewall. It is free and open source. It's a high performance one, widely utilized. It does have a nice, simple to use web interface, and it does support various add-ons. It's continually updated, and if you look at some of the competitive things, which we'll actually cover the next slide, some of them only provide updates every so often, and some of the more commercially available competitive solutions that have free versions don't update those free versions. So there's definitely some good advantages to this one. And so we're going to move into and talk a little bit about this. Again, this will include the actual PowerPoint with the presentation post. So I won't read every single word on this. As far as the competition, a couple of the different tools we looked at were pfSense, which is also free and open source. A little bit more complicated as far as setup and configuring. You have IPCOP, which is a widely utilized one. It's not as easy to extend to other distributions of Linux, and so that's what limits that one the most. And then you've got the BYOS, and so again, some details here about the competition. But for today, we're going to focus on IP Fire, and Dave is going to lead us through a demonstration of the actual installation process. So I'm going to go ahead and set focus now on Dave's screen and let him take over.
Okay, so to get started on this, I've already downloaded the ISO file from the website. So I'm just going to install this into a virtual environment so to show how the install would go on an actual computer, and then we'll launch into the web interface and see how you can do some configuration things with the firewall here. So I'm going to create a new virtual machine, call it IP Fire, set it to Linux, and just pick a 2.4 generic 64-bit version here. Just set some features here so I can let the virtual machine use part of my computer here to run this. I'm going to create a virtual hard drive. Just need a couple terabytes for a couple gigabytes rather for this install here. And then one thing I got to configure before I go through this install is to enable 2 network adapters here. So my first one I'm going to have bridged to my physical device that I'm connected to the internet and my home network. Second one I'm going to have is a NAT device. So that's all I got to do to configure VirtualBox, and then I can go ahead and run this. It's going to ask me to pick a location here for the install ISO. I'm going to go through that now. So just go through the install selection. Just pick some kind of the standard defaults here. It sees my virtual disk. I'm going to install to that 2 gig file that I set up. And that's it. That's the installation. We have to do a reboot to get into the configuration and start setting up the network adapters here. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to pick this first option here. I'm going to select again some of the obvious defaults here for these questions. Host name's default's fine. Same for the domain. I'm just going to use a password for this example, but I normally would set something much more secure in a real world environment. Same for the admin page. Through the configuration here, so I've got network configuration, and the way IP Fire works is if you have two network cards, you would have a green and a red configuration, which basically says green is the safe side, red is the internet side or the danger side. You can have multiple sources, internet sources, or various reasons why you would have multiple up to 3 or 4 network cards. So you have different options there. I'm going to just pick with green and red as the option we're going to use for this example here. Come down to drivers and card assignments. I'm going to set the green one to my first virtual adapter, red to my second one here, and say done to that. I'm going to set some of the settings here. So I'm going to set this to an IP address that matches my local home network system. And then red is just going to be a DHCP for this example. And then back enter. Done. And then I will set the DNS here just to make sure that's working. And done. I'm not going to turn on a DHCP server for the firewall. It's just for this example, I'm just going to show the firewall features. And that's complete. Okay, so now I'm at the login here, and I'm just going to do a simple ping test to make sure I'm able to see my home router here from the inside of the virtual machine. So I'm going to ping my home router, and that works. I can see that. I can do a ping to the outside internet by going to Google, and that also comes back and pings. So my my green IP address that I said here was a 192.168.0.50. So now in my host computer on my browser, I can actually go into that same IP address. It's currently doesn't have a secure certificate on it, but that's why it's giving me a warning about that. So I'm just going to go ahead and proceed on this, and then it's going to ask for login credentials, which I set a default a password on this. So this is the web interface for IP Fire, and this is how you'd actually go in and configure the options, settings you want for your firewall. So you come in here, it just gives you a basic rundown. Again, there's red and green here. Green is my internal network, so to speak. Red would be the public-facing internet, and the goal is to keep the green protected from the red there. So as you look, I can come through here and set various things that I might want to have access to. Look at the status of the computer, and it can give me a nice, easy to use graphical interface in terms of finding out what my network interfaces are. If I want to configure a VPN, I have those options as well. So lots of features built into this from the get-go. Under network, there's various things I can do to change the network settings. These are some of the additional settings or services that they offer that we mentioned in our slideshow. We've got IP security, OpenVPN, some dynamic DNS, time server syncs, and so forth. You can come in here under firewall, go to firewall rules. There's no rules set, but I can come in here and set a new rule if I wanted to. Specify some settings that would allow, port forwarding if I wanted to, for example, or let a various service have access to the outside or vice versa there. And then come here and look at detailed logs about what's going on if I can find out if somebody's been trying to get into my network and so forth. So that's the installation and login and configuration of IP Fire, open source firewall software.